all that space. Un poquito wiggle. Hey, what's going on, guys? I hope you're all doing well. Now, I know I may have confused some of you guys if you watched my previous video on the M&P when I stated that the controls on this firearm, as a matter of fact, the whole firearm kind of looked familiar and felt familiar to me. Today, I'm gonna talk about what this firearm reminds me of. Now, the reason I said what I said was because I happen to own an FN 509 Tactical. To make this comparison fair, I'm gonna take off the light. I find it kind of distracting for the purpose of this video. So I'm gonna use this tool. This thing never fails. I keep it in my wrench bag, I keep it in my toolbox, I keep it on my desk. Now let's take a look at these firearms and you'll see what I meant by why this thing felt so familiar. Let's start with just the back plates. I mean, somebody had to have copied someone else's homework here. The back plates are very close to being identical. Not the same, but very similar, as you can see right there. And while we're on that back plate subject, I guess, if you look at the suppressor height sight, pretty much the same height, almost the same design there, except that these are Trijicon. I don't know if these are just Smith & Wesson sights, but they're pretty good. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Like, they are so similar, it's crazy. And if you look at the slide stop, slide release on here, same thing, same design pretty much. I don't know if you guys can see that. The tab here, or whatever you want to call it, they are pretty much identical to the one that you find on the FN. And just like on the FN, you find them on both sides. And both firearms, at least it was the case for the M&P, where they had that stupid clown looking trigger shoe, which had a hinge trigger. FN also come with a hinge trigger, and just like M&P, now FN is switched to that trigger blade style trigger safety, but it's kind of like a hit or miss. There's no rhyme or reason behind what they're doing. I think the only consistent thing is like the Edge series, where you will get that trigger blade, but I've seen tactical models like this with the trigger blade safety, and they're still pumping out models with this hinge trigger style safety. So it is what it is, but it's kind of funny that both manufacturers went with this as their original design. These two are so similar that when I picked up this holster just for kicks, it's a Blackhawk holster for M&Ps, I was like, all right, let's see how good this thing is. And trust me, like, the retention on this thing is real. Like, I have to yank this thing out of there, and it conceals just fine. Like, I didn't expect it to work so well, but it does. This is the firearm where it belongs, right? I'm gonna take this out. Now, this will not fit because of the comp, so I'm gonna go ahead and switch the slides, and I'll show you something. Actually, before I make the switch, one more thing. Even like taking this thing down, it's pretty much the same thing. Bring the tab down, send the slide forward. The only difference is with the M&P, you are not required to pull on the trigger if you don't want to. Okay, you have that. You can use a tool to move that, whatever piece they call, I don't know the name of it, that, or you just pull on the trigger and then you can take your slide off. So again, very similar. Now this is where it gets wild. I'm sorry, kids, I can't do that in front of you because YouTube thinks it's gonna turn you into some. Back to this. This is my FN 509, but with the ported slide and no comp in the front. This holster belongs to my M&P 2.0. Fits right in. No problem, not a lot of wiggle, and retention is amazing. As a matter of fact, I really have to yank this out of there because the trigger guard on the FN is a little wider. So as you know, most non-light bearing holsters will have their retention focused in this area. So when this one goes in there, it is snug. Towards the end of my video, my M&P video, I talked about how the trigger guard kind of felt weird because I felt like it was pushing my middle finger way down compared to like most firearms where I'll be somewhere here. But with this one, my two fingers here felt like they had to spread a little more than on any other firearms that I own for that matter. And it's because this trigger guard, it's pretty unique. Most trigger guards here are kind of like vertical. On the M&P, it's kind of angled, which is funny because it's a little taller than most firearm in this direction and a little shorter in this. If it was vertical, this is how much space you would have had in front of this trigger guard. And you can clearly see it when I put the FN inside of the M&P holster here. You see that right there? That's the extra gap that can only be filled by the M&P's trigger guard. Duh, it's made for the M&P, but this actually proves my point. Now let me go ahead and put this back in. And you can see it right there. Not a lot of room left and no wiggle. All that space, un poquito wiggle. All in all, these two are very, very similar. The more I look at them, shoot, and get a feel for them, the best way that I can describe this is kind of like the Toyota to the Lexus you want to have. And this is not a slight to Toyota. I mean, come on, reliability top notch, right? So it's kind of like getting a Camry instead of going with, I don't know, I used to love the GS. I think they discontinued those, or an ES model. It's essentially the same company, just doing things differently, right? So there's more refinement on the FN than there is on the M&P. The M&P is more like you know, the working man, you know, kind of gun, and this one will be for, I don't want to say snobs, but essentially this is what it is. Like if you're on the fence between should I get an FN or an M&P, it really boils down to this. One is more refined than the other, and I'll get into it in just a second, but they are essentially the same firearms, and of course they both have their pros and cons. The pros on the M&P, very popular and affordable overall. This costs a little more, and you can tell that, you know, speaking of refinement and all that stuff, like FN is very proud of their products, and they'll let you know about it too. The aftermarket support on the M&P, I mean, it just no comparison to the FN. I can walk into a store and find some mags. I have yet to walk into any gun store or gun ranges or whatever and then tell them, hey, I need this part or I need this mag for my FN. The M&P is so customizable. I mean, it blows this thing out of the water. You have Apex that makes triggers for both, but the results are different. Okay, this is a much more easier gun to work on compared to this. I took this thing apart once, and that was the last time. I don't ever want to have to do that again. But this, I look forward to it. As a matter of fact, I may need to swap the sear spring out depending on the results I get over the next 200 rounds that I'm going to be shooting through this. Easier to work on, just like a Toyota. Much more complicated to work on, just like a Lexus. I mean, the principles are the same, but you know, the application may vary. The sear housing is completely different. Like this thing comes out in one piece. This is split in two, and you can see the seam right there where it meets, right? So when you take this off, these two parts just like kind of open up like a sandwich. So yeah, be very careful when you work on this one. But you know, speaking of the FN being more refined, this being a Lexus, this being a Toyota, or if you're a Honda guy, this being a Honda and this being an Acura, or Nissan and Infiniti, that's kind of like what you get. So if you already own an M&P and you are happy with it, there's no need for a 509. And if you own a 509, I'm not saying that this is a downgrade, far from that, because the triggers, I think even from factory, the M&P is better than that. But in everything else, I think that the 509 offers a little more. Even the optic plate system, this is much more advanced. I'm talking about it like it's the correct one. This is a direct mill slide, but on this slide right here, the optics system is just by far better than what the Smith & Wesson offers. Single mag release, you have an ambidextrous mag release here. Works both ways. Oh, where's the match? Works both ways. I was totally not prepared for this. Oh yeah, I wanted to touch on refinement. There's a lot of hot spots on this firearm. I would say, for instance, like this seam right here. You can even hear that, right? You can hear that. There's a little bit of it in the back. The back strap that you add on here can create some hot spots here because it's not seamless, like it's not a seamless transition right there. The same is true for the trigger guard in here. You have that seam, and even the trigger shoe that this one originally came from. I mean, they could sand it down a little bit, but they don't. There's no extra process in place to make sure that these are all refined. And this is why I said that this is more like a working man's pistol. You get the basics, okay? It's gonna run. Just buy it. Well, mine needed a little TLC, but you get it, take it out of the box, it's ready to chew on any type of ammo you want to put through it. With the FN, is there a seam? Yes. Do you hear it? No. Okay, you can barely feel it. They took the time to sand those things down. Even here, you can see it, but it's so hard to feel it. Even the trigger with the hinge safety blade, it's a hinge safety, but I mean, that thing is so smooth, man. I don't even want to switch it, you know, to another thing. I'm so used to this and works just fine. So yeah, long story short, this is why I said that the M&P reminded me of the 509. Just for kicks here. Right here, we have the M&P slide, FN frame. Okay, I'm not gonna keep going, but as you can see, I can kind of keep going. Just looking at it this way makes me wanna OD green this thing. I might get it cerakoted. FN slide here on the M&P frame, same story. As a matter of fact, this one kind of goes further back. Pretty crazy stuff. As far as I know, I think the M&P came out first. So if I had to say that someone copied their neighbor's homework, I will say the FN did, and of course they kicked it up a notch. More refined features, you get, I think, some extra mag, you get a better optic mounting system. That's it. This is what I meant by what I said. You guys take care. Thanks for watching. Be well. Catch y'all in the next one.